It's fair to say the digital age and the advent of online social media has been a boon for politicians of all persuasions. A couple of decades ago, the email revolutionised the delivery of the media release. The explosion of websites and blogs made political communication a two-way street. And more recently, phenomena like Facebook and now Twitter are radically transforming political discourse as we know it. However, the brave new world has its pitfalls for the pollies. This week we saw the state's opposition leader Barry O'Farrell make a bit of a twit of himself on Twitter. He publicly tweeted what he had intended to be a deeply off-the-record message to a journalist, in which he referred to the nation's Prime Minister as the Ranger. He also opined about the difficulty his federal Liberal counterparts were having finding candidates for the upcoming federal election. All deeply embarrassing. But of course, Mr O'Farrell isn't the only state politician who needs to do some work on their online presence. New South Wales Greens MP Rhiannon continued to cop flack this week after she was caught out misusing state parliamentary resources to support her tilt for the Senate at the upcoming federal election. The evidence was found on her Facebook page, her website and on her emails. Fair cop, says Ms Rhiannon, and she was quick to admit her mistakes and apologise for what she's described as a few sloppy errors. But that's done little to silence her critics, who've been calling on the MP to bring forward her stated plan to resign from the state parliament. Was it all just a storm in a cup of organic green tea, or a case of she who is without sin casting the first stone?
New South Wales Labor and gutter politics are twins.
Certainly the acting Premier John Hatzisteros wasn't about to let pass a chance to sink the boot into Greens MP Rhiannon when details emerged she'd used New South Wales parliamentary resources to assist her tilt at a Senate spot at the upcoming federal election.
Now we need to inquire as to what action has been taken to ensure that those resources are quarantined and not being misused for effectively catapulting Ms Rhiannon into the federal parliament.
Rhiannon was clearly riled about copping some unaccustomed heat when her propriety as a parliamentarian became the focus of the media blowtorch.
There I have my electoral allowance and how I spend my money. I challenge Mr Hatzisteros to do the same thing. That's the question you should be putting to Mr Hatzisteros. Why isn't this information public? That's how it should be working for all MPs. And I will continue to do that.
So what was the fuss all about? For a start, Rhiannon gave out the phone number for her New South Wales Parliament House office on a Facebook page promoting her bid to be elected to the Senate. She also sent emails on her state parliamentary account in which she described herself as the Greens' lead Senate candidate for New South Wales. The Greens MP also mentioned her Senate plans on a state taxpayer-funded website. The Democracy for Sale website has long published embarrassing details of political donations doled out to the major parties. But the site is meant to be only used for so-called state parliamentary business. On that basis, embarrassing the Greens' political opponents is a legitimate use of taxpayers' money, but promoting a switch to the Senate breaches the rules.
She should clearly separate her federal campaign desires from her state situation.
It should be said that Rhiannon quickly admitted her mistakes, but that didn't stop the calls for her immediate resignation, even though the Upper House MP has already undertaken to resign once a federal election is called. But it was Rhiannon's own party leader who took the most bark off the Green politician when Bob Brown was asked to buy into the issue at a Canberra doorstop.
Should she step down now as opposed to waiting for the campaign?
I think she should. I've explained it to Lee that we've got an election on anyway. Election campaign on, and I think it'd be very wise to. And I think she has told me that she'll be making an announcement about that in the very near future. So I think that'll be a good outcome.
Bob Brown's comments threw petrol on a barely smouldering fire.
I've got to say I'm a little disappointed in Ms Rhiannon. It's not exactly the sort of behaviour I would have expected from her.
There was little sympathy shown in Macquarie Street for a politician who has long taken the high moral ground over her parliamentary colleagues. But perhaps the biggest problem for Rhiannon at present is the prospect of political oblivion once she steps down from the New South Wales Parliament. Her chances of a successful tilt at federal politics are mixed at best. She faces a tough job of making it to Canberra and will need to focus all her energy on a Senate bid if she's to be successful. Anthony Green, what are Lee Rhiannon's prospects of winning a Senate spot?
The Greens have got a problem in New South Wales that their first preference vote isn't high enough to reach a quota in their own right. And the Labor and Liberal vote is roughly equal in New South Wales at a lot of elections, and in that circumstance it's very hard for the Greens to win the last spot. For the Greens to get up, they have to get ahead of either the Labor Party, last Labor candidate, or the last coalition candidate, and then leapfrog them and then get preferences and win the last spot. It's much harder to do that if your first preference vote isn't high enough, or if the two major parties are roughly equal. And so that's the biggest problem Lee Rhiannon faces in trying to win a Senate seat.
So how would you rate her chances at this point?
We haven't seen the minor parties win the last spot in New South Wales very often in the last 2 decades. I'd say she's only a 50-50 chance at this stage.